So Co-op, Unseen Co-op is a new initiative that was launched by Unseen to also find ways of showing work that might not necessarily be already on the radar of gallerists, but that's surely not the only reason why we launched this new format. In recent years, in the world of photography, in its extended form, expanded form, we find a lot of initiatives worldwide that are looking into methodologies of collaboration, of finding new ways of reflecting about the photographic image that is not necessarily focusing on its production only, but also on its circulation and how we can actually slow down this process of consuming images in a world that is accelerating so much, as we all feel in our daily lives quite often. So when Emilia asked me to become part of this and to curate a selection of 13 collectives, we started the process of a curated call. We contacted 25 collectives from all over the world to submit a proposal, and they sent the proposal, and based on that we chose 13 of them. I will present the list because not all of them can be part of this presentation. We have 3 collectives that will do presentations today. But the complete list is Brito Arts Trust from Bangladesh, Colectivo Mas Uno from Colombia, Dead Darlings from the Netherlands, Der Greif from Germany, Gash Collective from Belgium, Huber and Huber from Switzerland, Clara Kjellström and Tobias Feld from Sweden, Live Wild Collective from France, Ruang MES 56 from Indonesia, Nepal Picture Library from Nepal, Poyuit from Italy, and Radical Reversibility from the Netherlands, and finally Tendance Flou from France. So today we will hear from 3 collectives that work in very different ways with, on, or about photography, and I would like to welcome on stage Colectivo Mas Uno. So if Federico, you can make your way up. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the presentation. I'm Federico Pardo from Colectivo Mas Uno from Colombia. And we are a collective that, as the name implies, Mas Uno, sorry, I'm going to go back. It translates to +1 or add 1, and that's the whole spirit of our collective. We're always looking to add somebody new or somebody else or something new, an institution, a museum, a gallery that we can collaborate with. We like to collaborate so we can expand our network and grow. Not as a collective, but as a photo industry, right? So we like to say that by working together, we're not just adding, we're multiplying. So 1 + 1 is not 2. We say it's 20, 30, 80, right? Our focus, it's mostly Latin American region, but we're also trying to expand to other regions so we can start collaborating with people here in Europe, Asia, Africa, but it's a process. These are the 5 members of the Colectivo. We're all from Colombia. Here at Unseen, we have me, Santiago Escobar, here, and Juanita Escobar, who was also a student of the masterclass, World Press Photo. And we have Federico Rios and Jorge Panchoaga. These are the names. The Colectivo started 5 years ago, and it started between Santiago, Federico, and Jorge. And they got together because they wanted to collaborate. They wanted to bounce ideas off each other. They wanted to create new experiences, new spaces for those photographers who were starting and didn't have a place to go take a workshop or somebody to do a portfolio review. So you started very, very basic to open a space to collaborate and talk and share ideas. A couple of years later, Juanita and I joined as part of a bigger photo project that it's what brings us together right now. We call it 20 photographers, or 20 fotógrafos in Spanish, and it's a photo workshop. This is the main big project, our baby that brings us together as a Colectivo. And as I mentioned, our main interest is to create spaces, to bring opportunities to other people, other photographers, so they can network, collaborate, create projects together, educate, teach, dance, you know, to build the community that we're part of in Latin America. So 20 photographers, this photo workshop has been happening for 3 years. It started in the Pacific coast of Colombia, and back then it was actually 13 photographers, 13 friends who traveled to this remote, poor region of Colombia to teach photography to the community. Local kids, they brought cameras and they taught a photo workshop. Next year, it grew considerably and it went to the Amazon, and that's where the name 20 Photographers was coined, and it happened, and it was like this. 20 professional photographers were the tutors to 20 learning photographers and 20 local photographers, local students from the indigenous communities nearby in the Amazon. So it was 20 local students, 20 teachers or tutors, and 20 learning or paying photographers, right? That's when the name 20 Photographers came about. It was a huge success. We had tutors from Argentina, Mexico, the States, France, Germany, and of course the whole mix was a success. A great human experience, collaborative experience that the next year in 2016 brought us to Mexico. We partnered with Fotomuseo Cuatro Caminos. It's a beautiful museum, photo museum in Mexico City, and this was the big step to make 20 Photographers an international thing or a regional thing, right? An initiative. The structure there, we're going to talk a little bit later, became very, very popular, and it's sort of, I would say, our trademark. Next year, we're going to Bolivia in 2018, and it's going to be in September. So keep your eyes peeled. We're going to put out the applications soon. So if you're interested in being a photographer, or a tutor, or a student, or just a partner, or collaborate somehow, we'll be happy to talk. So what happens at 20 Photographers? Oh, this was Nuquí in Colombia the first time. This was the Amazon the second year. So group gets bigger. And then this is Mexico last year. So technology also evolves. Drones are around, so we do a drone portrait now. The structure that we use. We have 5 editors who are well-known photographers that have production and editing or curating experience, and they work along 20 instructors. So each editor has 4 tutors or 4 instructors they work with. We have 5 producers who are the people in charge of making everything possible. They are the lubricant, the oil that makes the machinery work, logistics and everything. And of course, 40 students. So we have 5 teams split by editors, tutors, and students. It's very transversal, even though it sounds like a hierarchy. Our main goal is to break boundaries. We don't like the idea of people telling what to do to the other. It's all transversal. People from different teams can collaborate. The editor, it's sort of in charge of designing the experience, meaning sharing some ideas or concepts that should be reviewed or thought upon so the work can be produced, or also how the work is going to be produced. Are we going to collaborate all together, or are we going to do individual work? So it's very flexible, very organic, and it's just beautiful. What happens, it's just beautiful. Some people decide to do joint works, other people decide to do individual works, groups decide to do one full work, and this is just some examples of how the event goes. We have Claudi Carreras. He's a well-known photo editor from Spain. He's been working in the region for quite some years, so we brought him to Mexico. Paula Thomas from Colombia, working with the local students on her project. And it's all fun. It's just, imagine, 80 photographers during a week in a beautiful country, making photos and talking photo. It's great. I wanted to share a couple of images of some work that has been produced in the past. Diva Estela, she was one of the indigenous students in the Amazon. She worked alongside Santiago Escobar, who's also presenting at the booth with me, and her project dealt with family violence from husband to wife. So this is an indigenous woman who knows about this issue. She gets a camera, she borrows a camera, and she starts exploring this subject in her community. And little by little, she gets access to these stories from her friends and the objects that their husband used to inflict the aggression. So very personal, no photo background whatsoever, but a beautiful story that is facilitated through a creative and photographic process. Her work was featured in Exit magazine a couple of months ago, or a couple of issues ago. So also to mention that you don't need to be a big photographer or have a huge career to produce work that is worth publishing in big outlets. The video that's going to play in the background, it's one of the projects that was produced during 20 Photographers Mexico last year. It's Claudio Carrera's group. He decided that he wanted to do a collaborative project. So he took his 8 students, 4 tutors, and himself, and brainstormed a whole project around the water. It should start playing soon. And they all collaborated, making images towards this project. They would have long editing sessions at night, printing little photos and doing the curation of this project. But at the same time, each group was free to produce their own work, or each student was allowed to produce their work. So this also shows how we can collaborate in one same project, even if we come from very different backgrounds. There were some documentary photographers, fashion photographers, product photographers, more art photographers, teachers, students. But if we all put a vision together, cool things can happen. And it's sort of a long video, but it's on a website that I can share afterwards for you to look at. So our collective, we don't produce work together, even though we've done some collaborative work. We're mostly independent photographers that came together to create these spaces, like 20 Photographers, the photo workshop, to build networks, push the boundaries of photography, rethink photography, reconnect with other photographers from the region, from the world, and just have fun. However, I want to show a couple of just a couple of slides of the work of each one, so you know what we do also as photographers. This is Santiago Escobar, his project Colombia, Land of Light, dealing with victims and the war, and bringing light to these communities that have been affected by war. So using a creative process to heal, to understand, to just talk about war, victims, all that stuff. This is Juanita Escobar. She's the one woman from Colectivo Masuno. Great photographer. She's also around, so swing by our booth if you want to talk to her. She's been living in this region of Colombia, the Llanos, the flatlands, towards the east, doing documentary photography that is very personal, very introspective, dealing with the struggle of women in the region, the elements, the connection to the land, and lots of visual metaphors about her life there with the cowboy community in this region. This is Federico Rios Escobar. He's straight photojournalist, working and living in Colombia, and over the past 4 or 5 years, he's been documenting the FARC. He's been following them as they approached peace. We recently signed a peace treaty with the FARC. They are no longer wearing uniforms, they are no longer armed, and his photographs are this account towards the last days of FARC. And that's a FARC guerrilla rebel swimming with a horse in the Pacific coast of Colombia. This is me, Federico Pardo, and over the past 2 winters I've been photographing life around the ice fishing houses in Vermont, in the United States. So I do portraits of the houses at night to try to get this ecosystem, the idea of why are these people doing this. Coming from Colombia, this was very strange, and that's what drew me to what's happening here. And then during the day, I also take advantage to photograph life around the ice fishing house as it happens. The fishing, how they preserve the fishes, just a work in progress that's growing and growing. And Jorge Panchoaga, he's very interested also in the relationships between humans and environment, and he's been working at this amphibian community in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, where people are very connected to the water, to the fish. That's their means of surviving. And they're having environmental issues, social issues, and he's being working with them just to portray the connection to the environment, to the fish, the problematics they have. And he uses sort of a documentary approach while intervening the images digitally to produce certain effects and visual metaphors. Thank you. Questions at the end, I guess, or now?
Is it on? Hello. Thank you, Lars, for inviting Nepal Picture Library to the co-op. We are very excited to be part of the co-op and experiencing all this. Before I start about Nepal Picture Library, we briefly want to talk about Photo Circle. Nepal Picture Library is an initiative of Photo Circle. I want to start with Photo Circle, and because in Nepal, when I grew up as a young photographer, there was no platform to share and connect with other photographers. So we started Photo Circle in 2007 as a platform to share, among the photo communities, our work, what we were doing. So in the beginning, we started with giving presentations. There was a monthly presentation day, and photographers would come and show their work. That is how we started. We have done this over the years, and after doing it for a couple of years, we started to realize that because in Nepal there is no photography school, so we needed to focus on developing photographers as well, building resources for photographers as well. So we started doing workshops, collaborating with different. In the beginning, we invited photographers from all over the region, from Pathshala in Bangladesh, and we also had opportunities to invite other photographers from Europe as well for the workshop. So that is how we started in the beginning. This was a workshop with Mass Nissen in 2011, with Saurabhura. And recently, this was the last workshop we did with Akina Books earlier this year. And the works will started to getting produced, but in Nepal there's only a limited amount of galleries, and galleries were not interested to show long-term photographic work that photographers were generating. So we decided to we use the streets as our exhibition space, and we started doing pop-up exhibitions. This was 2016. And slowly the work started traveling abroad as well. So the young photographers who were building new bodies of work got an opportunity to show their work abroad as well. This was the latest edition of Pics. That's a quarterly that comes out of India. We had this exhibition up in Mumbai. And doing all this over the years with the education perspective, with the public engagement through exhibitions, we decided to do our own photo festival. So in 2015, we started with Photo Kathmandu. With Photo Kathmandu, we could bring all the initiatives that we were working together with the education, public engagement, and bring it into one hub, and invite international photographers to, collaborate and collaborate with the local photographers in Nepal. These are some of the images from Photo Kathmandu that we have done. This was exhibition from Kishore Sharma. He has been working with the nomads in Nepal for the last 5 years. And doing it in the streets, we don't have proper galleries, but doing it in the streets, a lot of public could see the exhibitions and interact, because in Nepal there's no culture of going to galleries. So this was really something that we wanted to do. So this was a slideshow evening in one of the water sprouts in a historic part of town called Barton. This was Frederic Lecloux's work in 2015. He has been coming to Nepal for the last 20 years. And not just exhibitions, but we have talks. This was last year, 2016. And then we also have a residency component in the festival. So artists from the region could come to Nepal, live in Nepal for a month, and produce work in the end. We have also started publishing work, because a lot of the publishing houses in Nepal were not interested in these kind of photo books. The only books that you see most of the time are of the Himalayas or of the culture, but not something contemporary that the photographers were doing. Now I want to briefly touch about Nepal Picture Library and how it started. We started teaching photography as well, and whenever we teach photography, the only kind of visual images that you see, historical visual images that you see of Nepal were of the rulers of Nepal. There was no visual archive in Nepal. For a young photographer like me or the young students that we teach, there was no resource to go and learn photography and learn about our own historical past and do research on it. So we started Nepal Picture Library in 2011. And in the beginning, we just started the library asking our friends and families to contribute photographs to the archive. And so far, it's been 6 years, and we have digitized over 70,000 images in the archive, 150 plus contributors. So, and these are how the photographs were contributed to the archive. Some of them were prints, some of them were negatives. We were very lucky to find a few glass plates as well. So, all of these things were disappearing. Especially after the recent earthquake in 2015, a lot of the old photographs, in these old homes in Nepal were getting destroyed. And now people, are realizing the importance of archiving. This is our archiving station. That's me. And in the beginning, these kinds of images were what we were getting in the archive. These were like family albums, family photos that were hanging on the walls. I won't go through particular photo, but if you have any questions regarding particular photos, you can come to our booth at Unseen. And this is an example of a personal archive that was contributed to the archive by Zuzubhai Thakwa's son. Unfortunately, when we found this collection, he has already passed away. But it was something so refreshing, for a young photographer like me, and in this generation, you only see the only photographs that were exposed to us were like formal portraits of the aristocrats or the rulers of Nepal back in those era. And he was a young photographer, he was amateur, he was trained as a photographer, and the images that we discovered were so refreshing, very playful in a sense. And he was experimenting too, like putting up bed sheets in his terrace and using it as a studio backdrop and taking pictures. And his photograph, because he was also one of the in his neighborhood, he was the only guy who owned a camera. So all of his friends and, would invite him to like festivals, to weddings, wherever, everything that was socially happening, he was invited and so he ended up like documenting his whole society like in an amazing way. This is his friends going at a picnic somewhere in the valley. People were photobombing back then as So yeah, this was something that was really interesting that we discovered. I want to show you a different collection. This is, so whenever most of the collections in the archive are mostly based from Kathmandu, that is where we are based, and a lot of people those who own cameras were in Kathmandu because photography was really expensive. But whenever we go outside of Kathmandu, we try to find local photographers to see if there were any photographers or photo studios that were working in those areas. And we came across this particular collection from Ravi Mohan Shrestha. Amazing. We found in the archive before finding this collection, we had the historical photographs that we found were some were from the 1930s, but we had never found any glass plate negatives. So we are really excited to find about 100 glass plate negatives in this old rundown house in a village in Nepal. And some of the images were like really amazing. So having this archive over the years, a lot of people didn't own cameras, so to where you go to get yourself photographed were studios. So we ended up having almost 50% of the photograph in the archive are from studios. So we did a little research on how the history of Nepali studio photography developed over the years, and these are some of the studio photographs. The book is also in our booth if you guys are interested. This particular collection we found in a southern border of Nepal with India. The hats that the gentlemen are wearing, those were props in the studio. So you find these hats with different people along the way. And we also found how a person's fashion changes over the years, fashion sense. It's the same guy from the same collection over the years, how he... So the photographs were, coming into the collection because in the beginning we didn't have the contacts, and slowly the photographs started coming to the collection. But a lot of research we were not able to do a lot of research on the collection. So we started collaborating with writers and researchers. This was one instance when a writer, Praveen Adhikari, is interviewing one of the contributors. So through the research and through the photographs, we come up with different themes, and then we take it back to the public to show the photographs. This was in 2012, one of our first exhibitions from Nepal Picture Library in Patan, and people were queuing up to see it. This was at a vegetable market in south of Nepal, in Birganj. Some of the photographs that were contributed from those areas, we brought it back to that city, and it's very simple. Put a big white flex and a projector, and you can tell stories. And people are really interested in this too. This is from a recent exhibition that we did last year, working on. This came out through a research on the Dalit community in Nepal, and so with time the works have also traveled. So this was our first exhibition that we did in Chobi Mela in 2015 from the archive, and the studio photography research that came out of it, we showed it in Photo Kathmandu as well. So talking about Photo Kathmandu. A lot of people were not, it's really difficult to introduce photography to the general public in Nepal. So using archival images have helped us a lot to introduce photograph to the people, because they see their own past, and so slowly you can incorporate the contemporary photography in Nepal. We have used some of these images as in the streets of Nepal, like to introduce the festival. This was last year. Our projection artist Clément Briand from France, he came and used some of the archival images and projected it in Patan. This was a collaboration with a music festival. So whenever we get a chance to collaborate, we take the work back to the streets, back to the people. And so over the years, we started having exhibitions, and we worked very closely with art educators and schools to do guided tours around the exhibition as well. This was that one instance where the work was being shown in Patan last year. This was an art project using archival images with a local school in Nepal. And we try to publish the work in the local media as well, pushing the work, because some of these works, the local media are not interested. So we now slowly we have started to push the works out as well. And we also have a small photo studio set up in our booth. So if you guys are interested to come and take photographs like this in one of the vintage studios, please drop by. I also want, in the end, I just want to announce that we announced the dates for Photo Kathmandu next year as well. So Photo Kathmandu will happen from 12th of October to 16th of November. Please do follow us on our Facebook and get yourself updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Shika. So this was Shika Bhattarai. I forgot to introduce him. I'm sorry for that, of Nepal Picture Library. And now we are coming to the third presentation by Radical Reversibility. And I welcome Martin and Sjord.
Thank you, Lars. Hello, we're Radical Reversibility. I think we're the youngest cooperative at the co-op section, because we launched on Unseen Thursday evening, actually. We are a collective of one writer, an artist duo, and an artist photographer, myself. I'm Martine Stig. This is Sjord.
Hi.
And the mystery guest is Frank van der Stok. He's writer, curator. And we decided to start a cooperative because we feel connected in our field of research. We're individuals, like we're independent artists, but we share an interest in a certain area. We call each other, we call us a research collective.
Yeah, we in many discussions in the months before, we were defining actually what we are both or all interested in, and we came up with this diagram, which kind of pinpoints, but not too much, kind of like sets out the direction of what we want to do now and also in the future. And it's about, well, shortly about bringing history or specific pictures or images which have been made in the past into our presentations as thinking pieces, as mindsets where we can reflect upon as makers and as a curator. Here, for example, you have an image of Eli Tsitsky. It's also on show in our exhibition, and we were very much interested in his new way of dealing with photography, dealing with perspective, double exposures, and the fact that the image itself doesn't seem to have any direction, and that was something we wanted to take on in our own practices. And we just show you a few images where we are researching, which have to do with the gaze, because that's actually something we want to question, our conditioned gaze, and we would like to test that through our projects and through our photography. So we want to become really aware of what has been done, also not only in lens-based media, but also in art history, to kind of see if we can develop new strategies, visual strategies, and also to ask others to join us and with their research and with their work.
Yeah, we're very much interested in the way we are used to see the world, and like linear perspective is a construct we're so used to that we think it's real, but we try to find alternative ways of looking. So we try to decondition our way of looking at the world, depicting the world, and thinking about the world. And we study like examples from the past. For example, here, these are close-ups from icons where reverse perspective is being used. So it's actually the wrong way, and people believed a long time that like the painters who painted those icons weren't able to depict the world as it was. But nowadays there's more like, people think more like that there was a way of depicting the world view. So not the viewer or the human being in the center, but God in the center of the world.
Yeah, this is a photo of Soji Ueda. It really makes sense to kind of also bring other artists and other photographers in our thinking. And it's a Japanese photo of 1940. And here you can see that he's of course making a portrait of two people, but he's just putting them really far aside. And you can question yourself, you know, what is really the subject? Is the subject really the people or the space in between? And it triggers something in our looking, and we really want to know what is actually at work here in this photograph. So we would like to invite people to write, for example, about this sort of photography and publish that on our website, which hopefully will become a platform where we can exchange ideas about perception and looking.
Yeah, we show some examples of our like images we study, but well, this is the Day Nobody Dies of the work of Bromberg and Chanarin. It's like reversing the way of depicting the world. So yeah. This is a work which is on show at the booth at the moment. It's of Hiritsuk van Oevelen.
Yeah, it's just, we just want to see how these kind of influences from other cultures and from other times influence our practice at the moment. So, for example, we made a whole series of diptychs and quadtychs and centered or pointed our camera on the same feature in a landscape, for example, and just photographed around it. And this set of photographs, we chose two photographs and present these photographs next to each other. So the idea is that there arises kind of like a scanning of the surface instead of like looking into a depth or a field of depth. So it is a very simple way to experiment with what can you actually do, how can you become more aware of space through photography. and then there are more photos. But it is about every time about this looking, not only being contemplative or so, but really about how your eye moves through the photograph, and also the idea that I would like to pose the question: is photography always? Can photography also present something instead of represent something? That's just we all know, maybe the answer that it's maybe impossible to do so, but. Is that really so? We would just like to test these simple questions.
Here's some work I'm busy with at the moment. It's also in the booth. It's a series called Profiles. And what I like to dive into in this series is like the influence of the technical progress on our way of like perceiving the world. Like now we see the world through drones and satellites much more, so we're getting used to the top shot, so to say. But what does that do with like the archetypical human face profile, the way to recognize people? This is an attempt to redefine the human face profile from a different angle. So basically, well, this is the most extreme one of the series till now. Maybe this is the way we are supposed to recognize people in the future. This is also it's a film still of my film, which is on view as well in the booth. It's a film shot from one high point in Genova, and I'm kind of scanning the streets, the surface of the city. And I try to redefine like the top shot or the high angle view. And I want to loosen it from our connotations of drones, surveillance camera, and film noir. It's something somewhere in between. We like to work with guest artists, and this time it's Stefan Keppel, together with Hans Gremme, who also made a beautiful publication. This is his book, which is, I think, 2 weeks old, where it's presented here at Unseen.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very different way of depicting, photographing. So we really would like to ask people to really experiment and to push their own boundaries. So they made also, for the first time, work together. So the graphic designer Hans Gremme and Stefan Keppel, they made books in the past, and now they presented a new book, Flat Finish. But they also made an installation for the first time, and that's really exciting to see how they go through stages, and how photography changes in graphic design and changes in an installation, and maybe that leads to different ways of photographing and maybe different ways of bookmaking again. So that's something we really would like to promote as a collective. So since we are very young and also working with a curator, well, young. As a collective, we are very old persons, but the collective is very young, and that means that we are, in that sense, not established as you guys in Nepal or in Colombia, and we are really trying to define ourselves and see what the potential is between individuals, independent artists, but also curator, and that leads to really interesting discussions on how to pursue this goal of connecting research with images, or making research through images. And for example, we had this small idea. Okay, then every time we will make an edition of a work, and we try to sell it. But we also want to ask people to contribute with an edition, and also ask other people to write about this edition, this specific work, and what is actually happening in that specific photograph. So that again contributes to the research on images.
So an open platform. We really invite people from other disciplines to think with us and make work and share it. So.
I also wanted to say that to kind of like make a point, we also created this manifesto because we know from the old days they had a lot of manifestos, but now it's a little bit quiet on that side. So we thought, okay, to engage ourselves, we make a small booklet where this manifesto is printed. So it's in here. So if you want to have a copy, we are very glad to distribute it and to really, take it into the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.